So we are starting our animation project. We have our storyboard sketch, but not much else, right? So I have my storyboard here, and it gives me a plan. It tells me the setting I want to use, the character I want to use, and then the major actions that happen. And the transformation that I'm showing, beginning, middle, and end of, is a change in the environment. So not only am I going to have to build an environment, I'm going to have to build assets that allow that environment to change. Now, the advantage of digital is I can get perfect copies of things, and I can make multiple versions of an iceberg and melt it a little bit each time. So what I need to do for this assignment now, assignment 5, is build 2 different folders. The first folder is going to be just called setting. And the next folder is going to be called character. Now, it doesn't matter what your storyboard is. If it meets the requirements of the assignment, which is that it showcases a transformation, it is telling a story, right? A transformation has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in order to tell a story, you need a character. A character is something you tell the story through, whether it's a tree, whether it's a paperclip, whether it's a cat. You need to understand what your setting is, even if it's minimal, right? We talked about Garfield with the scarf. Well, if I have Garfield with the scarf, and then in the next frame, he gets hit by a snowball, that makes sense, right? Because that scarf does enough to help me, as the viewer, understand the setting. Or I can make that setting really explicit, as I've done in my storyboard. I can show where we are and then introduce the characters so that I make everyone comfortable with where we are. So then if I zoom in on my character, the viewer still knows, oh, they're in that place that I already saw. Now, what if you see Garfield with a scarf, he gets hit by a snowball, and then you pull out and you see that Odie is in front of a fan on the kitchen counter, and it's really mashed potatoes, right? That's called a delayed establishing. And that setting then becomes kind of the joke, or becomes the payoff. So there's lots of ways to play with establishing shots, play with setting, but even if you don't show a setting, your audience is going to assume a setting. So you want to think that through. Okay, so these are assets. So I could have a broader folder that's just called assets. But more than a folder of assets, I need to set up a Photoshop file of assets. So what I'm going to do is create 2 Photoshop files. And I'm going to create them from scratch. So I say File, New. And because animation takes so many layers, I've tried this multiple ways. Because it takes so many layers, we're going to start at the resolution we need at the end. We are not going to work at a higher resolution than we need, because some of us are going to have over 100 layers, and we want them to all move easily. So I'm going to call this assignment my name, or this Photoshop file, Carl Assignment 5 Assets, all in caps. I am going to make it eight inches by 8 inches, and I'm going to make a resolution of 150, not 350, but 150, because we are making a GIF animation, and this will look good on even high-def screens, but it is not bigger than that, because you don't print out an animation. You might print out a storyboard, and we'll do that, but then each panel won't be 8 by 8 inches. It will be more like 2.5 or 3 inches. And so then it will be a high enough resolution. So this is the format we're going to use, 8 by 8 by 150. RGB, white background. This is my assets folder, or file. Then I'm going to do another similar, identical, basically, Photoshop file.
Shouldn't we say that first?
Not yet, because we just labeled it. So we haven't put anything in there, but it will keep that name. And then I'm going to say Carl Assign 5, and this will be in all caps the stage. Now the assets file is basically our treasure chest. It's where we keep all of our different images and layers and aspects that we might want to use. The stage is where we put our finished shots. And that's what makes up the animation. And I want it to be 8 inches by 8 inches by 150 pixels per inch. And we're going to need both of these in order to do the project. Okay? So go to my assets file. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller because we don't need great size here. We're just building tools, building things we can use. And I want to be able to see these folders. So basically, setting assets and character assets. What kind of setting assets do I need? Well, I definitely need to go into, for my idea, go into my assignments. And I'm going to want my assignment 1 landscape. Do I want my JPEG, do you think, or do I want my PSD file? Yeah, I mean, what has more versatility? The multiple layers, right? So what can I do? Well, I can just click this. This is very helpful for Macs. It's similar for Windows. But if you click on an image or a file and then hold down Option, you can copy it into another area within that same computer. So I'm going to copy that PSD file into my setting folder. This is because I'm going to use my landscape as my setting, I'm using my assignment 1 PSD file, really large file, putting it into my setting assets.
What's the command?
It's just Option and drag and drop. Hold down Option while you drag and drop, and it will copy a duplicate. Okay, now, just to be safe, I'm going to call this Carl setting asset. I'm going to rename the file because I don't want to damage or somehow confuse it with my assignment 1. Okay, now I'm going to open this up. And I'm going to do something I would never do to my assignment 1 Photoshop file. I'm going to reduce its quality. And this has a character in it as well. So I need a square. So the first thing I'm going to do is use the crop tool. And I'm going to hold down Shift. And that will help me crop to a square. And I can crop quite small. So if I'm actually focusing in on my character and the water and the ice flow, I might want something like that. And if I hold down Shift, I can extend it a little bit bigger if I need to. I can move it around. So the first thing, I'm going to crop that setting. Then that allows me, this has some other assets, some character assets in it too, but to change its resolution. See, I'm going to crop it maybe a little bit bigger. More space will give me more options. But hold down Shift and it will always stay a full square. So maybe about there. Okay. So now I go to image size and I'm going to make it 8 by 8 inches by 150 pixels per inch. So what I've done is I've sized now an asset file so that it will work within my stage, my puppet show. Now this has a lot of layers that can be really useful, but it's maybe a little too much. It's too complicated, right? So which ones do I actually want? Well, actually, I think I want this big texture fill. I don't need this guy. Don't need that. So you can simplify. I don't really need this anymore. No, it's kind of nice. I do want that. Sure. That could be fun to use later. Depending on assets, you might decide, oh, instead of my creature sinking into the water, I'll just have it get skewered on icicles, but probably not. So I'm going to edit this down because I'm going to have enough complexity and enough layers already. Huh. Oh, that's the frost. So I'm actually going to merge these. So I combine layers where I can, like the frost that was on top of my creature. I want that as a separate element. That's fine. That's good. So I'm just kind of tidying house. This isn't even in there anymore. But do I want this as an asset? No, I don't. Yes, yes. And because it's low resolution too, even though I can see some mistakes in my landscape, like things that haven't been cut out like that, I don't need to worry about making it perfect here because it's in a much lower resolution. Don't need that. All right, so there's a lot of things I need, but now I have to think like an animator. I don't need the sketch layer anymore. I might as well keep the background white layer. Now, is there any reason that I would need this as an asset for my idea? Is my sky going to move? If it did, I would want to keep this separate so I can move something against it, right? Like I could take this sky and I could transform it to be a lot longer, and then as part of my animation, I could just move it. Right? So you have to decide this is where you have to be really thoughtful. What are the working parts? And honestly, now that I say it out loud and think about it, that could be cool. so yeah, I might as well leave that. But if I'm not worried about the sky ever changing, then no, I can just flatten that into the layers above. But this and this and this, all of these layers can be merged together. And so what I do is I hold down Shift, I select them all, and then Command E will merge them together, or you can go to Layer and merge layers that are selected. So now all of that's merged together, and it's all behind my creature. I don't need my creature to interact with any of this stuff. It's all going to happen as what's called the backdrop. So, or matte painting. This will be in the background. It will stay the same. So that's set. My sky might move. That's why I have this as a separate asset. So you're thinking as in kind of theater terms. Now this I want to keep as a separate asset because I'm going to have my character kind of interacting with it in different ways. This overlay, I'm going to mark my character here, turn him off